You are listening to the Wildlife Photography Podcast with Rob Reed and Josh Galicki, bringing together the love of nature and photography. Episode 16, we discuss the art of cropping. Well, hello everybody, and welcome to the Wildlife Photography Podcast with me, Rob Reed, and my co-host Josh Galicki. Hey Josh, how's it going?
Hey, good, Rob. Good, Rob. Great to be here again. It's been a little while, so I'm glad we're back. And interesting topic too. This is pretty cool.
We were talking, weren't we? I mean, it's been over a month since we've spoken. Good, one thing and another going on. I mean, not least of which was me getting married. So
it's an important event. Yes,
exactly. So I did take a little bit of time off for that. So it's been a bit difficult to sort of cram everything in, which is why it's been a little while in between episodes. So apologies to everybody for that. But here we are. We're back in the driving seat again and ready to talk about another subject. And today we're going to be talking about cropping and how that has an effect on your images and the various ways that we can use cropping to improve our photography. So before we get going on that, though, I just thought we'd catch up and see what's been going on. So what's been happening in the world of Josh these last few weeks?
It's been pretty busy. One thing that did happen recently, and it was a lot of fun. So I live in a small community. It's a village, basically, maybe 140 people, called Claiborne. And I'm just outside of St. Michael's on the Eastern Shore. And it's a great little community. We have a community center. It was an old Methodist church that was basically changed over into a little small amphitheater and the like. So the town council, they asked me to show up and do a presentation on my photography because they see me around with my cameras and they're like, what's that crazy guy doing out there in a blind floating around and doing all this stuff? I gave a presentation and I focused on all the images I've been taking close to home in the backyard and in and around town in the Eastern Shore. And it was really nice. We had about maybe 60 people there and I was, showing them the camera gear that I used and walked them through all the different images. And it just reinforced my theory because I did show some stuff when I travel around, Africa, Alaska, some stuff even from Shetland. We actually have some residents from Scotland, believe it or not. So they really appreciated that, but originally from Scotland. And, it just goes to show that when I was going through those images, everybody really liked the local stuff. And again, I think a lot of the best photography, it's close to home. You can find beauty everywhere. I kind of walked away with that, but it was fun. It was good to walk them through. And it's always nice to see people's eyes light up when they don't even know certain things are around. They're like, oh my goodness, I had no idea this is in my backyard, or I've never seen that before, So at minimum, that even spreads the word a little bit, in terms of awareness. So it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, that's incredibly powerful. I mean, I did a similar thing a few years ago in the village that I live in, so it sounds very similar, to where you are. It's a very tight-knit community. And we've got as people will know, because we've talked about it before, but we've got a woodland literally just outside the back gate, 100 yards up a hill, and I can be in the woods. And I did a presentation on, the wildlife, but particularly the birds, actually, in that area of woodland and what people could actually see on their own doorsteps. And they were amazed. I mean, I even had people that used to do surveys for the British Trust for Ornithology, and I was telling them what was in the wood and they never even realized.
Wow.
Showing pictures of, in particular, firecrest.
Mm-hmm.
And they would say, "Oh, we never realize that was there." And I said, "Well, what are you saying? I could hear them all the time when I'm walking around there singing away."
Wow.
But because they make them and Goldcrest, they're very, very similar. But you can tell them apart. But yeah, so no, it's an incredibly powerful thing to do local stuff like that.
I totally agree. Matter of fact, in the yard, I just had very similar to the firecrest. What do we have? Golden crown and ruby crown kinglet.
Kinglet. Yeah.
They come in these huge migration batches, and I've got hundreds in the yard just flying around, and they're just absolutely stunning birds. The firecrest too. I mean, they're amazing.
Yeah, no, the colours are incredible. And if you're in the UK, having a colourful bird is quite an unusual thing, because most of them are pretty drab, I have to say. It's not like you guys, all those warblers and everything. And you just think,
yeah, we are lucky.
You are very lucky. you know,
Yeah.
with the bird life that you have over there. You know, it's so varied as well. It's
Yeah, definitely. And the waterfowl are actually very colorful to a certain extent, you know, in some ways. Like I was just photographing some black ducks. I don't know if folks have ever studied a black duck up close, but they are stunning. The purples and some of the detail in the feather. It's beautiful.
yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? I mean, that's one thing that photography really unlocks for you at times, and actually we can come on and talk about that when we talk about cropping and the various uses of cropping. But you know, when you take a picture of something like a you know, a starling, for example, which I know you're not keen on for obvious reasons, but you know, the when you look at it from a distance, you know, you think it's pretty bland, but you get it in the right light and up close, and you
Mm,
see all those amazing color details, you know,
yeah,
in that bird, you know, and the sort of oily appearance of its plumage. It's just stunning, you know,
yeah,
the
they
real
are.
iridescence of it, you know, in the right light, you know, and photography unlocks all these things. You know, it's
Yeah,
one of the things I
starlings
really
are
love about
beautiful.
it.
Although it's
Yeah.
very hard, I think, to have that same opinion on the house sparrow. I'd have to say on my most wanted list, the house sparrows are probably number one. I'll put the starlings at number three, maybe.
Yeah, and the thing is about the house sparrow that, you know, I kind of get it, and yeah, they're not the most colourful of birds. I mean, I love them because I think the thing about the house sparrow for me is obviously because it's, you know, endemic here,
Yeah.
uh, is is the sound they make. You know, in during the summer, you know, when you've got a flock of house sparrows and you hear that noise, it always takes me back to warm summer evenings when I hear them
Mm,
sort of chirping away, because we have quite a good population of them here in the village. I don't get them in the garden that often, but you know, I walk 100 yards down the road and the hedgerows are full of them.
mm,
You know, and I can hear them, you know, chirping away in the summer, which is, you know, kind of takes me back to times that I've spent in, you know, on the Spanish islands, Mallorca, and places like that. You know, when you
yeah.
get them, you know, get good sort of concentrations of them in those sort of warm summer days. So it takes me
Yeah.
back to those, yeah, to those lovely summer evenings with a gin and tonic and a in hand, and
Well,
uh,
you know, you're right. They don't have a song, right? It's just it's a call or a chirp, right? I
yes,
don't.
a chirp, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and when you get a group of them, you know, they're all sort of chirping away. It's just, yeah, I find it's one of those really calming noises, I think. You know, I probably have you know, I probably have that on a recording just to calm me down. Oh, this will make you laugh,
Although
actually.
it's interesting when I hear that noise, it's like I get PTSD because I'm
Yeah.
looking at the bluebird house. Did they occupy it? These bastards! I need to get rid of them. So it's amazing the
I'll, I'll
difference.
tell you a quick story. This will make you laugh, actually. We've got a because well, this time of the year when the nights are drawing in, and I get a, you know, I I struggle with the dark hours, I have to say, particularly in the
Me
morning.
too.
So Jennifer and I bought this alarm clock, which has got like this sort of sunlight type glow light on top of it, and you can set it so it gradually increases in its intensity in the morning. So it's almost like the rising sun, and you can
Mm,
change the color, temperature, and this, that, and the other. And you can pair that with a bird song of your choice. So they've got all these recordings, and we have it set on or have done since we've had it on Blackbird, because
mm.
it's just a really nice song. It's not really nice and fluty, and yeah, it's one of the most pleasant songs, bird song, I think, around there, and it's kind of synonymous with dawn. It's part of the dawn chorus. Anyway, I've been when I've been walking the dog recently, I've been hearing this woodlark in the field behind us. I'm thinking, oh, I haven't seen it yet, but I can hear it. It's cool. Anyway, I was in the bathroom one morning, and all of a sudden I could hear this woodlark really close. So I said to Jennifer, I said, look, the woodlark must be in the garden. I can hear it through the open window. And she started laughing and laughing. And I said, what? She said, I changed the alarm
Yeah.
call to woodlark.
Well, at
It was
least
coming out of the
you were
bloody
alert.
alarm.
You knew. You know. Yeah.
I
That's
said,
funny.
I said, well, I could hear this bloody woodlark, and I said, I know there's one in the field. I thought it was. I said, I thought I was going to add it to my garden list, which would have been
That
pretty
I'll tell you, Rob.
amazing.
That's one thing I miss this time of year too, because you know it's colder, longer nights, and you know you just don't have as much bird song. The one saving grace where I'm at, we have owls calling now. So we have great horn owls, we have screech owls, and I can hear them. Past couple nights too, where it's been clear. you could see the moon set on the bay, and you have this moon glow, and you listen to the owls. It's actually really pretty. It's relaxing, but it's all about getting clear nights for that stuff. And I don't know what it is, why owls call more on certain nights, but I've noticed clearer nights, calmer nights, especially around this time. Like the great horns call almost all night.
I was going to say exactly the same thing, because we have tawnies we have a really good population of tawnies where I live. So, you hear them all the time at night. And in fact, they set Sky off barking all the time.
Mm-hmm.
It just must be their pitch of their call must really set her off. And if I like the window open at night, even it doesn't matter how cold it gets. I like that fresh air coming in, and I've seen them fly over the garden quite often if we've been sat outside.
Mm-hmm.
So they come in really close, and I'm sure they've been sat in the trees, and on the fence boundary, of the house, or on the roof and that sort of thing. So I like particularly November actually, and I can walk around the local woods sometimes if I take Sky out after it gets dark, and I go out with a head torch. Quite often I will come across them just perched above the footpath, so just above my head as I'm walking along, because I think what they're doing is they use the path, they hunt the small mammals on the path. But it makes sense. It's a sort of clear area, and I've had them literally swoop low over my head, about 2 or 3 feet above my head, as I've been walking along the path at times. So that's pretty
wild.
Cool.
That's wild.
Yeah.
The craziest thing I had recently, and I thought they were bats, because normally the bats come in. This was, when did I closed the pool down? But this was a couple months ago. I think it was in September, early September, and I was in the pool at night, and I was swimming around. And sometimes, the bats will come down, they'll eat the insects, but it was there was still twilight left. I had a bunch of nighthawks come down, and they were migrating through, and they were just flying all. It was incredible, and that's one of those things. Of course, I got out of the pool, I ran and grabbed my camera, and they were gone. But
of course,
yeah, but it was wild. I'm like, that's a big bat, and I turned.
Yeah, have you ever tried photographing them at night in flight?
No, nighthawks or bats, you mean?
No, nighthawks.
No, never. I'd like to do that. You just need to get the setup ready, and have I guess maybe a certain area. I don't. It was interesting because I don't. Whenever I've seen them migrate, they'll eat bugs in the air and like keep flying around, and they kind of fly like a moth. They're erratic, but I've never seen them get drinking the water. Like bats will come down and they'll skid. So it's probably hard to predict where they're going to be in terms of setups and stuff like that.
Yeah, because I've done nightjars, which are obviously very, very similar. But they tend to be during the breeding season, so sort of May, June time, and the males in particular will come out and they'll check you out if they particularly if I think there were, if I remember rightly, there was back in the day, the way to attract a nightjar was to get 2 handkerchiefs and sort of wave them in the air because they resemble the white spots on the male's wings. So they thought it was a rival, and they come in and they fly around you. But I find they're quite inquisitive anyway. So if you come into their territory, as it were, you sort of walk along a footpath that might be part of their territory, they will often come and check you out and fly around you. I have actually photographed them using very low powered flash in flight. It's very, very hit and miss, and I think you need something like a sort of 300 millimeter 2.8 to do it. So rather than a lot of these zooms are not, you just don't have the light collecting capabilities to really nail it. But yeah, that would be a fun thing to do again. I think we'll try and do that. Yeah.
In the UK, do they call nightjars still? I don't know if this was a thing in North America, but some of the old timers, they call them goat suckers. Have you ever heard that term used for nightjar?
Never heard that term. No.
Yeah, it was a term used over here, and I think it came out of like colonial times. There was some sort of misconception that they fed on livestock at night or something to that effect. I'll have to look that up. But yeah, they call them goat suckers. I was like, okay, well,
there's loads of folklore surrounding.
How could a nighthawk kill a goat, or I don't know, but
it's funny, isn't it? There's loads more folklore about nocturnal birds and animals than there is. I guess there's a mystery to it.
Yeah,
that inspires that sort of thing. But no, it's really interesting. But Anyway, we digress.
I gotta look that up.
As we always do. But I tell you, that's something we ought to do a podcast on. Actually, it's maybe nocturnal birds. You know, how to photograph them, or
I think that's a good idea.
yeah, sort of talking about owls and nightjars and nighthawks and that sort of thing. So yeah, we'll
They're amazing
we'll
birds.
line that one up. Yeah, I must actually. I've been meaning to do this. Start a Google sheet or something we can both add to when we get ideas like this. So we get a list of things to do. But anyway, so the subject today, as I alluded to at the beginning of the podcast, is the art of cropping. And it sort of struck me the other day when I've been doing a lot of woodland photography of late. It's just bug that I seem to have caught, and I've been really enjoying the sort of slower pace of it and the more considered approach, I think. And of course, I've been away recently to Wales, and I was saying to Josh before we started recording that I spent a day in the most amazing Celtic rainforest. So temperate rainforest, on the west side of the UK in Wales, and Britain it's quite denuded in terms of its wildlife and its habitat, because it's so densely populated. But there are little pockets still left, and when you find them, they're just magical. And I found this particular location just so inspiring. You walk in to an area of ancient woodland, which is a very specific habitat. These trees covered in mosses and lichens, the likes of which you don't find in many other places of the UK. So a very, very special place. I found it very inspiring and spent a whole day, photographing, just enjoying it basically, but taking the odd picture, when I found a composition that seemed to work. But what struck me was the consideration when I was taking the image. In my mind, I had the crop already in my mind when I was taking the photograph, and then realizing how much the shape of the crop affects the perception of the image and what it actually portrays. And I thought, well, what a great subject, because it's not only the feeling that you're trying to get across in an image that dictates the crop, but there are lots of other things that we can talk about as well. I mean, I made some notes here, which is unusual actually for these podcasts, because they're normally pretty organic and we just rabbit on about this, that, and the other. But I actually prepared for this one. But you can use cropping in a number of ways and for a number of things. And so I thought we'd have a bit of a deeper dive into that. So why don't we start with using cropping in terms of choosing the aspect ratio to change the mood and feel of an image, because this is something I actually don't think some photographers think enough about. They pay attention to a lot of the other aspects of the image, but when it comes to cropping, and we I've seen this in Wild Art Photographer of the Year quite a lot, when we're judging images and you're looking at something and you're going, that's a fantastic picture, but why has it been cropped like that? If the crop had been adjusted, it makes it so much better. So there's almost a lack of thought gone into that aspect of photography, and I think it's very underrated is the wrong expression, but
I completely agree with you, Rob. It's an art form, and people just take it so lightly, and it can make or break your image. In many ways, it's composition, right? I mean, cropping is composition when you think of it.
Yeah, it is, and that's one of the notes that I've got actually is cropping for composition. But I'd actually like to start with discussing ratios and how the ratio can change the mood and message of an image. And I'll give you an example. So as I was taking these images in this fantastic rainforest that I was just telling you about, the first picture I took, it was very chaotic. You know what woodland's like. It is pretty chaotic, but I had this mixture of autumn color which was setting in against a lot of sort of gray bark and a lot of cool tones. So I had this lovely mix of cool and warm tones, and I was taking the image against the background was the opposite side of the valley. So again, in shade. So lots of cool tones, no sky. And it was, said it was quite chaotic, but it was all a mixture of trees. And I was trying to get the feel of the denseness of the place. So it was almost cinematic from my perspective. I just felt that it needed a dramatic crop. So going that sort of 16:9, that cinematic feel just suited that image so well. I mean, obviously with a podcast, it's you're listening. It's not a visual thing, so I can't show you the picture. But go to my Instagram feed and you'll see it. But to me, the crop was as important as every other element of that picture to make it work. So there's an example, of using a crop to enhance the message that you're trying to portray with the image that you take. And similarly, if you're looking at square crops, which I don't do very much, but the square crops can give you a sense of balance and a sense of, I guess, sort of peace. And when you're looking at, let's say, a standard 4:3, for example, and you crop it, so let's say you're taking a water bird and you've got a central water line and a reflection on the bird and everything else. You put that water line in a central position using the crop or using you're framing it as you're shooting it, then you're portraying a sense of tranquility with that as well, because there's balance. So using cropping in a clever way like that, I think is a really important part of photography.
Yeah, I think of, to your point, Rob, with square crops, I think of them more as, portraying symmetry or closer to symmetry in terms of balance. And it's interesting too. I mean, if you're not shooting with a medium format or a large format camera, your images out of camera are going to be 3:2, right? Or 2:3, depending upon whether you take horizontal or vertical images. But, and then you have a decision, do you want to keep that ratio or do you want to change it? It's interesting. For years, I would always keep to 3:2, 2:3, 3:4, 4:3, maybe 16:9, as you were just talking, for a more pano effect. And I did a lot of that too because of printing, right? Because you're limited in terms of what you can print, paper sizes, and what looks good. But recently, I've just been going freeform, right, where I'm not even using the set ratios. I'm just kind of cropping to where I want it to, or I feel. You just have that gut feeling where you say to yourself, "Okay, this works." 16:9 is an interesting ratio you were just talking about. I use it for some of my wildlife images to give actually the opposite effect of something like wide, pano, cinema, more for it's almost like you're only seeing a certain part of the scene, like you're in a hide, like it's a sliver. You're looking across, and it adds a little bit of mystery because it gives the viewer the impression that they're just seeing a little bit, but it's what you want them to see, right? Versus, which you can obviously accomplish the opposite too. So it's an interesting thing. To what we were saying before, cropping is composition, and when it comes to wildlife, nature photography in general, but when it comes to wildlife, we can't have them pose. We can't set everything up. So there's always going to be, for the most, I know for my images, 99.9%, there's at minimum some sort of cropping, whether it's to level it, whether it's to get rid of certain things. I do some cloning in my images in post-processing, but I don't like to clone a lot. I like the authenticity of what's there. So working the edges is important as well when you're cropping. I try to, if there's woodlands are a good example. I've done some woodland photography, and you have to really pay close attention to distractions all throughout the frame. Once you have your subject and you have the light, you really need to work the edges to figure out, does this make sense, right? And this goes beyond vignetting or anything. Just what do you want to include in the frame? And it can be a challenge, but it's what separates, I think, it's what separates a photo from an artistic photo or a well-composed photo.
I think if you're paying attention to the edges, I mean, if you're in a woodland and you're taking trees, I mean, they're not flying away or running away, so it's a bit easier to take your time with it. And pay attention to all the edges and the corners and everything else, and make sure that there's nothing which is distracting. When you're taking birds, for example, and you're taking behavioral shots, they're doing something, they're flying away, they're fighting, they're feeding, whatever they're doing, and you're lying down, in the mud, and you're cold and you're wet and everything. It's difficult to pay so much attention to, the areas of the frame that don't include the subject, because your concentration is on that, obviously. So yeah, I use cropping in the same way that I will then use it as a compositional tool. Instead, if I'm taking a woodland, my composition is already set, and I compose, in camera, if you like, at the time, and I've already decided, what I want to see, what ratio I want to see in the final image, and I shoot accordingly. With, as I said, with wildlife, it's different. If it's moving around, then I'm using the crop, as a compositional tool, as a tool to remove those distracting elements. Because I'm like you, I will clone stuff out, but I like to tell it as it happened, really. And I like that authentic feel. And particularly if you're talking about competition photography, then you're not going to be able to clone anything out anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So use the crop at that point. And the other way of using the crop with wildlife as well, of course, is that sort of magnification factor, if you like.
Yeah.
So with all the pixels that we've got, at our disposal now, we're not shooting 12 megapixels anymore. We're shooting 45 or plus. So you have that ability to crop in 50% plus if you want to, and still have a very, very usable image. And using a lens that, say a 500mm lens without any converter or anything like that. So that's another good use of a crop. And I've seen some crops you would,
Cropzillas. Yeah, no. Yeah,
exactly.
That's one of the things where it's technology dependent, right? I mean, if you have a lot of resolution in an image, you can definitely go in closer. I shoot with the R3, which is 24 megapixel, and the R5, which is, 45? Huge
45,
difference there.
Yeah.
So if I'm shooting with the R3, I know my limitations in terms of how much I can crop or can't crop. So obviously you want to if it's a wildlife shot and you want them to fill the frame to a certain extent, you need to be closer, versus cropping 50, 60%. Your image is going to suffer. Now, Instagram, it probably won't. But if you want to print that out on a 13 by 19 or something even larger than that, then yeah, it's not going to look too good.
Yeah, and that's something we don't do enough of, isn't it? Printing, I think.
I love printing. It's there's so much that I can't even express the level of satisfaction when you have an image that you love and you print it out and you're holding it in your hand. It's tactile versus, looking at something on a screen. So I think it's way better than posting anything on a website, having a print.
Yeah, I think it's the equivalent of doing an ebook or doing a physical book, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, an ebook is, yes, you might as well look at a website, quite frankly. Whereas if you've got something tactile and physical in your hands, and I think there's another dimension to a print as opposed to looking at stuff on the screen. I mean, you can see a lot more detail on the screen, to be frank. It can display a much wider color gamut than printing can, but there's something about a print. I think there's a rawness about a print. It's a whole different ball game.
Yeah, and if you want to print, cropping's important because obviously, if you have a really unique crop, and it's not gonna work well with certain paper sizes, right? So, most people print 4x6, 5x7, 8x10, 8.5 by 11, letter. And then you get 13 by 19, 17 by 20. There's set sizes there. And if you have an image that doesn't really fit those sizes, it's going to be, you can obviously print it, but then the framing is going to be custom. You're not going to be able to get, a standard size frame to mat it. So it costs you a lot more money if you're more unique with your cropping composition.
I tell you that when obviously I did the Wild Art book, that the first year of the competition, that I thought very hard about the aspect ratio of the book for that very reason, because there are so many different sized images. And in particular, I remember the experience with Bird Photographer of the Year. That book was a little, it wasn't as tall, so it wasn't as square as the Wild Art book. So the limitations with the vertical images, they were quite restrictive, and I felt that those images weren't given enough because of it, because you had to restrict the size of them literally because of the ratio of the book.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is a real consideration when you're coming to print something like that, where you've got a variety of different image ratios, and from horizontals and verticals to panoramics to all that sort of stuff, to try and do everything justice. So yeah,
there's one image in that book, actually. Maybe I've mentioned it before, I can't remember, but we were talking about square crops. It's a relatively square crop. It's a spider web by, I think it's Rachel Piper.
Rachel
and
Piper,
it
yeah.
looks amazing in print. And anyhow, if anyone has the book, please go and look at that particular picture, because I think that's a great usage of a square crop.
And if anybody hasn't got the book, I'll leave a link in the description. Go and buy one, because there are a few still available. So yeah, but it's amazing. It's an amazing book, but that particular picture, it works so well in the book in a square format. But it is the ratio that was chosen based on past experience that enabled justice to be done to images like that, as well as the sort of more traditional 4x3s and whatever. So yeah, it's an important part. What else do you use cropping for, Josh? Do you pay a lot of attention to the sort of mood that it will generate in your final image?
Absolutely. Mood is important. Environment is something that's always predominant. I like to shoot images with space, to have, to tell the story of the animal, the environment. Just recently, I was kayaking through, not far from here, actually. It's one of the northernmost cypress swamps in the United States. So it's up here in the Northeast. You'd swear you're in Louisiana, Rob, right? I mean, it's all bald cypress. It was beautiful. And I had a 24-105 with me. That's all I had. And the wildlife there is pretty calm. So I was able to kayak right up to great blue heron, bald cypress, great color. I shot it at 24 millimeter, which, you got to be pretty close to shoot it at 24. This isn't camera trap or anything, this is so, it's all about, composing camera, try to get everything set in terms of where I want the bird. And then there's the question, because you're on the water, you have reflections. Do you go 50-50, meaning, you put the horizon dead set in the middle of the frame and reflections are below everything else's? Or do you go 3/4 of the way because there's better color in the, so you have to make all these decisions. The easy answer is take multiple shots if your subject is standing still, and then you can decide later. So yeah, absolutely. I think it's really important when you're composing to incorporate environment to consider the crop. Cropping is a lot easier if you have a bird in flight against the blue sky, or you have an animal, and everything else is pretty minimalistic around it. It's just a matter of where do you want to put the animal in the frame. I always say that I'm sorry to say this, and to all you bird photographers out there, animal and nature photographers, but landscape photographers, in my opinion, have a much better grasp on composition, because there's many more elements in the frame. There's a lot more complexity. There's just a lot more detail and content in the frame than a typical wildlife shot. Wildlife photographers are good at composition, but I think there's a lot to be learned from landscape photographers, because many times it's a rule of thirds. Get the bird in there, put it on the lower left, lower right, or whatever, and boom, that's it. But there's much more to that, in my opinion, when it comes to coming up with a complex image that has more in it than just, an illustrative shot of a bird.
I absolutely agree. And I think we've touched on this before, haven't we? When you're taking close-up images of birds, composition isn't necessarily the most important element, because it almost takes care of itself, because you're taking a close-up picture of a bird. When you zooming out and you're including more environment, a bit more space, then it becomes a lot more important. So when do you already have the sort of aspect ratio in mind when you're framing something up and shooting it, or do you sometimes make choices afterwards?
I mostly make choices afterwards for the most part. The biggest decision you have to make in the field is whether you want to go horizontal or vertical. That, I think, is a decision you want to make in the field, because if you shoot something horizontally and you decide that it will look better vertical later, you're cropping a lot out in post process, right? So,
Yeah.
or you're changing a lot and whatnot. So I think the decision between horizontal and vertical is the most important. Compose as best you can, and then, kind of go
use the
for it
crop.
later and put the finishing touches in post. If it's just an animal that shows up to your surprise and it's like, oh, there's a, bald eagle flying down, you shoot the images and that's it. You can, it's pretty easy. But I think when you're trying to come up with an image that's well thought out and you have time to take that image, I think you need to solve horizontal. Horizontal. I like that, horizontal. That takes care of both.
It's
right?
a new word.
Yeah. So you want to solve that horizontal versus vertical in the field, and then figure it out from there. I will say though, if you're really close to an animal, it's not like putting, like puffins, for instance. We were in Shetland, Kerm and I, and we were so close. We were doing details where we were just getting the bill structure of the eye. That's a whole different thing, because
Do you
really
know?
need
And
to pay
I
attention.
think that is such a difficult
It is.
thing to get right. When you're right in close like that, that is when the crop is critical.
Depth of
Absolutely
field,
critical.
even, because
Yeah.
you're so close. So when we were, when they tuck in the back, when it's cold and they'll tuck in, that's when you want to get some of those tight shots of the feather detail. That, I think, is really important when you're shooting that image and figuring out what your crop and your composition is going to be. Less important if you're 25 feet away and you're just picturing the bird on the rock, puffing on. Then it's pretty straightforward. So I think it's when you're furthest away and when you're closest is when in-frame composition and thinking of the crop matters most.
Yeah, no, that's a really interesting, and I think it's that's inspired, actually, when you actually think about it. I mean, I've been doing a lot of obviously I see a lot of pictures through Wild Art. You guys do the judging, but I like to have a good look through what comes in, and I'm already picking out my favorites anyway, and generally they're the ones that end up on the short list that you guys pick out.
Mm-hmm.
But I've been doing judging for other people as well, but in particular Photo Crowd just recently, which I know you do as well, Josh.
Oh, yeah,
don't you?
absolutely.
Yeah. And I was doing a competition over the last couple of weeks. It was about best part of 5,000 pictures in that particular one, and it was colorful wildlife or something like that. And it would, doing the judging process of that was quite an inspiration for doing this podcast as well, because I was looking very, very closely at how the photographer's choice of crop affected the effectiveness of those images. And I can remember one particular. Okay, so you're dealing with colorful wildlife, so there are certain species that are going to come up again and again and again, and you're going to guess what they are. There's going to be kingfishers, it's red cardinals, it's parakeets, it's all this sort of stuff. The color, the things that you would imagine would come up in a competition titled colorful wildlife. But there was one picture of a red cardinal, which again was a square crop, which is unusual with wildlife. To be honest, people picking square crops, it's not the most popular crop ratio, but it was in the snow and it was just a head detail, but its crest was up, its head was at a jaunty angle, there was a nice angle of snow in front of it. So all the diagonals kind of lined up to really make it work well. And it had these little flakes of snow on its beak. And it was such a simple shot of a very common subject in that competition, but that to me really, really stood out because of the crop and the overall composition of the image, which I think most people would have wanted to straighten it up. But putting it at a jaunty angle, so it had its head, its crest, pointing into the corner of one of the corners of the image. Then you had this diagonal line of snow in the kind of opposite direction. Then it energized that picture. And had the photographer straightened it up, it would just not have had the same effect at all. So the crop was critical there.
Yeah. And it's interesting when you say it energized it, because I totally agree. I'm kind of picturing it now. And I look for, when I judge those contests, I look for lines, patterns, or certain things. And it's amazing how our brains are. I mean, at a certain to a certain extent, it's kind of, pre-programmed in our brainstem, and how we've evolved to look for certain things, right? And it triggers things. Most people who look at it, the layman, they wouldn't even know, but they would be like, oh yeah, I like that image better. It's in the subconscious, right? So it's trying to figure out those things as a photographer, what's going to stand out and what's going to appeal, guiding people through an image or making people pick that up. That's more of a scientific thing, but it's interesting if you think about it. It's pretty deep.
Do you think you can actually teach composition, or do you think that there are people that just naturally are just naturally good at it, who just see things straight away?
That's a great question. I think the answer is both, but I think for folks who just don't have it, they don't have that natural eye, if there's such a term, it's harder to teach them composition. You'll see plenty of incredible photographers who are also great at design, right? So, and all of these things kind of bleed through each other. It's like they're great photographers. Their homes look great. Their interior design taste is great. They understand color, what complements, and that's even helped me, frankly, when it comes to doing projects around the house and setting things up. And if you're good at composing a wildlife image, you're probably pretty good at composing where your couch should go in your living, right? So there's all these different things. So I think a lot of people just, I know maybe it's controversial to say this, they just have a better eye. They have that sense of taste, maybe is the right word to use, and they're more attuned to picking things up and really excelling versus other folks who maybe maybe they have a more mathematical mind, or they're an accountant or something like this, and it's harder for them. I guess it's right brain, left brain type thing, but
I guess it comes down to having an artistic bent or not, really.
Yeah,
because if you, I've always just been able to see things and naturally, and I never photography is a journey, right? You never stop learning. It's like anything in life. I think, if somebody says, oh, I know everything I need to know about that, that's the wrong attitude.
We're all lifelong students, right?
And this is why I love competition so much, because I'm always seeing new ideas and approaches and things that I think, oh man, I've said it on the live that we did over the weekend for abstracts. It's like, I never would have thought of taking that picture, never in a million years. So you've opened my eyes to that. Thank you for that. It's a real privilege to be able to do that. But I've always been able to just pick things out and see stuff. And I know people see things in different ways, and photography is a subjective art form, like all forms of art. You'll get things that I love and somebody else will hate. I mean, it's just the way it is. But I take photography for me. I don't do it for anybody else. I take it for me. But I've always been able to balance things. I've always had that natural ability to compose a scene without even really thinking about it too much. Seeing things. I mean, I don't know whether you do this, but I'll drive along or I'll walk along somewhere, and I'm always seeing photographs in my mind's eye as I'm walking past something, and I'm going, it must annoy the hell out of Jennifer, because it's almost like
all the time. I mean, and that's the beauty of it, right? You're trying to create some sort of order out of chaos, or you just embrace the chaos, right? And you just it's kind of how you want to express yourself. And some people, like you say, I think are more, they can express better artistically than others. It's just
I mean, and I don't go around doing that stupid thing with your fingers where you when you put your fingers together and you make a frame and you look through it. I don't go do that, but I even do consider the sort of crop, not with wildlife necessarily, unless I've got a bird that's sat somewhere and you can see the scene, you go, oh, that would look great in that sort of format. But I even, if I'm doing woodland or whatever, I've always got the crop in my head. I see the crop as well.
It's important there, because I think if you're off a little bit and you don't compose it correctly in camera, or you're not considering the crop in a woodland, that's a big deal. If you're on a beach photographing a shorebird, not a big deal, right? So it's dependent on your environment and how much content is in your image.
Yeah. So is there any other way that you would use cropping in your photography. I mean, and we've talked about, perhaps removing distracting elements. We've talked about supersizing things, if you like, zooming in on the crop, and obviously, with the modern technology, that's given us so many more, so much more scope for doing that. We've talked about giving it a mood. And giving it, and of course, and we've talked about, I guess, sort of correcting things that particularly, right? Okay, this is the one thing that
pet peeve. I know
annoys the hell out of me, right? Noise that, you just, okay, so you see a fantastic picture, the lighting's great, they've got the focus bang on, the mood's brilliant, this, that, and the other, and then you look at the horizon or you look at the waterline or whatever, and it's pissed.
Yeah, it's
Use my
too many gin and
language.
tonics with that horizon. Yeah.
And you just think, do you not see that? Do you not see that? Do you not pay attention to that? And it's just a small crop is all you need just to straighten that up and pay attention to the detail.
I saw an image recently, Robin. It killed me because it was an incredible image, just as you say, and it was a reflection image where you had an animal feeding. It was an African image actually, and it was you had this mammal drinking water, and it was one of those deals where it was a near perfect reflection, and it was flipped, right? You've seen that before, where the reflection's on top, and so they went out of their way to do that. It's a great image, but yet the horizon was crooked. I'm thinking, oh my God,
that's the whole essence of the picture.
Yeah,
you've just screwed up.
But at the same time, you didn't, so it's I agree, it's a pet peeve of mine. It's so important. Yeah. Especially when you have water and you have a very clear delineated horizon. You got to get it right.
That's something that's actually we haven't talked about with cropping, I guess, is flipping images as well, because I've seen that a lot. And it does, particularly with reflections, of course. People will turn them upside down and try and screw with your mind. It's kind of seen it quite a lot. Or the other one is just taking a picture of a reflection, and you don't actually, you don't actually show the thing that's reflected, and then you flip it around and turn it upside down, and
I like
it really messes with
you
your
get
brain.
The reflection and it's a horizontal shot and they flip it vertical to make it more abstract, right? Or it creates a shape or something to that effect. We had an image recently on that in Wild Art. It was an American, no, it wasn't American bittern, it was, I think, a Eurasian bittern, whatever the bittern is.
I remember. Yeah.
And it created like almost a face, like a woman's face with it. I mean, it was amazing. Think about, cropping and artistry. That shot was amazing.
Yeah. I think it's really thinking outside the box sometimes, isn't it? I love photography when it messes with your brain.
Yeah.
And you know what the subject is, but you're thinking something's wrong there, and it takes you a while to work out what it is and what exactly is going on, and why that it's been portrayed like that. It's been processed like that, and then you realize and you go,
And when you think of cropping too, when it comes to creating a unique image, I myself draw the line between images I can take in the field that can result in a print, something that anybody would be like, oh, I'd love to have this on my wall, versus just another image. I was recently at a wildlife festival not that long ago, a couple weeks ago, and they had a photographer. I didn't have a stand set up, but I wanted to check it out because it was wildlife photography. And there were so many images where it was just, a wood duck floating or a bright bird, and they have the metal prints, and, it's really glossy and shiny. And I'm thinking, again, this is just my taste. I'm like, I'd never put that on my wall, or maybe in
but it's. Do you think that's a case of using a medium to try and elevate a ordinary photograph?
Could be. It could be. And
some of those metallic prints are great.
Yeah. It's not something that I think people will want on their wall unless they're a specific type of, bird nerd, and they want to get a couple things up on the wall, but there's no artistic quality to it, in my opinion. It's a good image, in my opinion. And again, this is just my opinion. If you're a wildlife photographer and someone who doesn't even care for wildlife looks at an image and they say, I want that on my wall, that's a really good discriminator that you've got, I think, a pretty special image.
I
no
think
one wants a bird on a stick singing on their wall. They just don't.
I always think about photography is you're looking to elicit a response from the viewer. whatever that response might be. And I guess cropping and composition can be used to change that response, to manipulate the response that you want from the viewer. And it's a whole subject in itself.
It's a bit of a high for the photographer too. I can say this personally. When I was given that talk in my town, you'd go through the projector and you'd bring a picture up and you'd hear, oh, you'd hear people express or say things, and it gives you an indication that, oh wow, okay, this image is a hit, or this image is more special or whatever. But you can just gauge by the reaction of the audience.
Yeah.
Whether it's got something, a comedic value, or just an impact. And
exactly. It's almost like a comedian, isn't it? When they wait for they always say the best jokes are the ones where you get this slight pause, this intake of breath, and then people laugh.
The punchline.
Because it's, you've shocked, and then they get the humor of it. And so that's the more complicated humor. And I guess photography well, that's a form of art, isn't it? I mean, comedy's an art form. Photography is an art form. And I do like that response, as you're saying, from the audience and some of the talks I've given in the past, where, you will get that from people, and you can almost tell the images that are going to have a response, and it depends on your audience as well. I mean, if you've got an audience of say you're going to a camera club, and the audience, they know about photography, and they've seen a lot of wildlife photography, and they're not really into the cutesy type stuff that will elicit that sort of from Joe Public, as it were, your non-photography public, but they won't look at it in the same way. They'll be looking at the skill involved in actually taking the image, or they'll be I think if you're showing people subjects that they've got on their own doorstep as well, I think that is quite important. I mean, if they've got a connection with it, do you know what I mean? If I'm showing somebody, not that I've been to Africa, but if I was showing somebody African wildlife, although there is a connection, I guess, it's a familiarity rather than a connection, with African wildlife, but they don't have the same connection with it because they don't know enough.
And they've seen it before on TV. They're like, oh yeah, David Attenborough showed me that the other day, right? Or what? There's probably a greater sense of connection initially with that stuff than they would, because they're not seeing photos of foxes or snapping turtles in their backyard. They're seeing a lion on TV.
Yeah, exactly. That's about any place they'll see it generally, or in a book somewhere. But But anyway, so cropping. I just think that to sort of wrap it up, I just think that it's probably one of those areas that people don't pay enough attention to. And I think that if you're listening to this and you just go back through some of your images and just play around with different crops and see how it actually changes, or can change in certain circumstances, the whole feel and dynamic of the image. Just really give it some thought, because as I said, that's something that when I've been through a lot of the competition images, I just pick up on and think, oh, that would have been so good had it been cropped in this way, or I want that slightly tighter, I want that slightly wider, I want less space at the top or the bottom or the sides, I want a different aspect ratio to really emphasize certain parts of this photograph. And I think it's such an important element. So go back and have a look through some of your stuff and just start getting a feel for it and seeing how things, those sort of crop ratios and whatever, can make such a big difference. Such a big difference.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what's next for you, Josh? I guess Thanksgiving, isn't it, this week?
Yeah, lots of turkey. Not the.
It's not a good time of year for turkeys.
Definitely not a good time of year for turkeys. Just more waterfowl. The tundra swans are. It's interesting. I thought of you this morning, Rob. For the first time out back, I saw mute swan mixed in with the tundra swans. I think of the UK every time I see mute swans. We have them here and there on the Eastern Shore, but. I thought, I was like, okay. So I added a yard bird. So I've got a mute swan. Just more, I would say more waterfowl photography. Things are starting to heat up now. Owls, no immediate plans in terms of travel. I've been so busy with just local projects around the house and getting things set up. I frankly been just having a lot of enjoyment shooting around in the yard and whatnot. So most of my focus has been very, very local, but no big plans yet. I want to definitely get some trips squared away here for next year, but nothing other than that. Just getting ready for the holidays and doing some shooting.
And how are you getting on with Shetland? Culling your images from Shetland.
I processed one image from Shetland.
And I've seen it.
Yes.
Was that the one you're shortlisted in?
In
Close-up photographer of the year.
Close-up photographer of the year. Yeah. It was that's the only image I processed, actually. And that one obviously stuck out when I did the first call of the underwater stuff we did on the NOS boat. Because of, obviously we're talking about symmetry, and that's a bit of a unique crop. I think that's a 16:9, or that's more of a panoramic.
Yes, cinematic type crop.
Yeah. So that's about it. I still have one more hard drive to go, and I think I'm about 75% of the way through my culling on that, and then I'll start getting things out here.
Processing a few more. Excuse me, frog in my throat. I'm looking forward to seeing some more come through on your Instagram feed.
Likewise,
what you've been up to. What have I been up to? So as I said, I had a week away in Wales, which is great. Still got a few images to process from that, but they're more kind of landscape type things rather than wildlife. I didn't really get the time to devote to birds or anything on that trip, but I was just so fascinated by that Celtic rainforest that that was a wonderful day. I guess a bit like you, we've got the waterfowl coming in now, so the local lakes are going to get some attention. If we get some nice sort of frosty mornings, a bit of mist and a bit of atmosphere, that would be great. I mean, one of the things I really want to get, because kind of, you're talking about mute swans, I've kind of done a lot of mute swan stuff. I've got some really nice mute swan images. Can you improve on them? You're doing the same old stuff again and again and again. I like to kind of do new things, but one of those images I've got in my mind, and I have had for the last 2 or 3 years and not managed to get yet, is the fighting coots or moorhens. I don't mind which they are, which it is, but I want it backlit with mist early in the morning.
You've been talking about this shot for a while. You're going to get it.
It's so difficult. So I want to get, I'll try and concentrate on that this year, I think, as far as that's concerned, because, how many more images of ducks and things can I there's always a new way to photograph them, I guess, but so that's something that I want. So a bit more action and behavior, I think, in those waterfowl images is going to be my approach. Then we're off to Yorkshire over Christmas. So again, that I'm hoping there'll be some nice sort of winter, some winter trees and things to be doing there. And you never know, there might be opportunities for dippers and that sort of thing in those locations. So that'll be good. Then in January we're off to South Wales again.
Nice.
And we're staying in the same place we stayed at over Christmas last year, which is literally right on the beach. So it's the place where I had the windows open and I was hearing curlew and oystercatcher and turnstone as I'm waking up in the morning. So literally I can just roll out of bed, pull my waders on and just sit in the water and just photograph them as against the rising sun. Well, assuming it's not cloudy, of course, which every possibility it will be in January. But so, there's that coming up. And I love South Wales as well. It's just a totally amazing place. So there'll be all sorts of, I guess that'll be a bit of all these things are holidays, but that'll be more of a bird trip, I guess, than anything else. Oh, and then, we're planning in June to go to the Camargue in France.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, that'll be amazing.
Well, Georgina, when I met Georgina in the airport, the week before I met you, actually, you and Kurum, as you came through from Shetland, she was talking, she'd just been to the south, and she was talking about the flamingos, and honestly, it whetted my appetite, and I thought, we've got to go, because Jennifer loves the south of France. she spent some time there as when she after she was during her student years, she spent some time there, work experience, so she wants to go back. And that's not far away. So yeah, we've got probably a couple of weeks traveling through France and end up in the Camargue for a week or so.
Oh, that'll be amazing.
So that'll be.
Although I hear it's well, you'll get incredible images. It's an interesting thing. They basically, from what I'm told, they have like somebody who gets, they kind of corral the horses in the water, and somebody rounds them up, and then they kind of chase them out. The kind of like a cowboy type shows up and wrangle.
All right. There's a bit of manipulation going on there.
A little bit, yeah, from what I hear. So, well, the images will be incredible. I think it'll be a little bit more of an orchestration, but why not?
Yeah,
I'd love to get those shots.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. So yeah, so it's planning for those. So and probably some birds in the garden as well over the winter. I've been sorting the garden out and sorting my sort of bird table out and positioning it over the weekend. Just gone, for that sort of thing. Over the next couple of months, because the light will be pretty good. I mean, my garden's quite difficult. It's not particularly big, and it's south facing, so it doesn't give me. We've got a ridge to the east, so we don't get the sun till later on in the morning because of it. So it's a little bit tricky, but it's only in the winter really it works well. So because the sun's at the right angle. So there's a couple of months there of that sort of thing. I said on Friday I'm going to meet Victoria, and we're going to do a bit of maybe late fungi stuff if there's sun still around, because it's still been very mild, or just sort of abstract autumn leaves, that sort of thing. So spend a day out with her.
Tell her I said hi when you see her.
I will do. Yeah, I will do. She's doing well. It's good to see her sort of back out with the camera, actually.
Good.
And sort of producing some work. So so that's basically me and my plans. And obviously we've got Wild Art to wrap up for this year as well, seeing as that the competition is now closed, and so we've got a couple of categories still to finish up judging, and then the overall thing, which we'll announce at the beginning of 2024, so in January, I guess. And then sort of plans for the following year. So it's a bit full on. And as we were discussing off, before we started recording, got plans to sort of for the YouTube channel as well next year. A Wild Vision. So we, obviously we've been talking about that. And try and grow that a little bit, and put some decent content on there. Talking about Shetland, I've got a film that's half done on Shetland, which I did with just my mobile phone, because I couldn't. Although I had I've got a little Sony camera, which actually I use when we're doing the live presentations to stream the picture feed, but it's really handy for doing those videos. It's quite good quality. It's quite a good sort of vlogging camera, but it's so difficult. Well, you know what it's like in Shetland when you're on the boat and everything's going nuts. So I literally just use my phone to film things, and actually it's come out all right. I just need to write some and narrate it. Everything else is together, so that's coming up. I'll get that out in the next week or so. So yeah, I'll you'll see that when it crops up, but and you'll recognize some places there, I'm sure. Bring back some memories for you. But yeah, so next up, what are we going to do? We've been trying to get a few guests on. I keep saying this. It's been a bit difficult to try and organize a time when we're all free, but we've got 3 or 4 guests sort of lined up that we will be recording with over the coming months. Lots of other topics to talk about, and as ever, if any of you out there want us to talk about anything in particular, got a subject in mind, then well, the best way to do it probably is to reach out to us on Instagram accounts and just send us a message, and it's probably the easiest way of doing it, because that's the thing that we'll pay the most attention to, I guess. So so do that. The links to those will be in the show notes, but you'll find us. If you Google our names, or if you put our names into Instagram, you'll find the accounts. So anyway, no, Josh, great discussion as always.
It's great,
and thanks everybody for listening. I've really enjoyed the discussion. I hope you've enjoyed our ramblings as usual, and we'll see you all in the next one.
Take care. Thanks, Rob.
You have been listening to the Wildlife Photography Podcast. If you have enjoyed the content, then please help us to spread the word by sharing a link on your social media platforms, giving us a like, and leaving us a comment. See you all again next time.